After watching our allies seemingly turn and run all at the same time, I can only think of one reason for that. And now that we are flying in close and we can see over the horizon, yep, it's a true "oh crap" moment. On the far left side of the human settlement, by our perspective, of course, it looks like some sort of kraken had somehow got up here, somehow come up from hell and just tearing everything apart. As we got closer, we could see it wasn't a kraken. No, it was what looked like giant caterpillar types. They had just burst from the ground, and now they're just starting to tear everything apart. It takes a few moments for us to actually fly closer, as we can't go all that fast, being that we're gliding, not flying. And as we're there, we keep asking each other what the hell we're looking at. We weren't sure, as these giant grubs seemed to be thrashing all around, seemed to rip everything up. One of them even went up and wrapped around the base of the giant water tower at the top of the hill. At that point, it spun around the base violently, cutting it down. We watched as this huge water tower exploded on impact. That's when a realization hit me. I've seen this type of creature before, but it wasn't this size. It's frickin' cutter worms, or at least a variant of such. Since when did they have a carapace, though? They never did. They were always squishy. If we had chickens, they just ate them up. But now these things look like they got armor plating, but it's not full armor plating. It's strange. Each one of these giant grubs is at least 3 times the size of a bus. So as they're flipping and thrashing at the ordnance being punched at them, at least a half a dozen are blown open, and the rest are still just wreaking havoc, tearing everything up as they continue to move towards wherever in the hell they're going. These creatures have those stubby legs on their ventral side like any caterpillar does, and a partial shell across the back, which is very odd. It looks almost though they're trying to camouflage. It's strange. When you get closer, you realize there's no eyes at all. They're simply lunging at anything that makes noise. And there's that gigantic mouth up front that seems to grab everything and pull it down. We get close as a worm tries to eat a group of people running away, only to get a shoulder-fired rocket thrown right down its throat. As his caterpillar reels up from the pain, I heard one of the flyers say something about a gag reflex. I would have laughed at this as smoke was coming out of its mouth, but we had more pressing concerns. At this point, it is far too hot down there for us to fly in and try to do anything. Humans seem to be pouring everything they have into these giant grubs too, although they don't have that many weapons at this point, and I'm sure they're low on ammo, but they're still going. As they fight, we circle very wide to try and not get caught up in anything. We see where the grubs have actually emerged from, and we end up going that direction. We look over close and we can see the giant holes that run very, very deep. They seem to be bunched together. This is not normal worm behavior. From where we are, we can see the bodies of these grubs laying all over the ground, from the hole all the way to where the fight is actually taking place. The full humans putting up a hell of a fight too. They're not giving any ground they don't absolutely have to. I just wonder how long their ammo is going to hold out. As we continue to circle, I'm looking at the path of destruction and realize something, and it hit me like a softball into the junk. On the opposite side of the post are massive trees that are growing. Trees that pump out a hell of a lot of O2. If you simply do a size comparison between how cutter worms used to be against shrubs and maybe seedlings and stuff, these would be perfect meals for those bulbous bastards. And yet what stands in their way? Us. I start yelling this to the other flyers so they realize what's going on. Most don't understand what a giant tree has to do with anything, and of course I've been noticing more and more of these lately, but I never realized that this was going to be an issue. The rest of them are also confused because they have no idea what the hell cutter worms actually were. I tried to tell those on the ground through my radio, but I got absolutely nothing but static. We circled the holes for a moment when a female flyer just started screaming and yelling and pointing down towards the hole. We all took a pass by, and none of us were sure what in the hell was climbing its way to the surface. But whatever it is can't be good. I yelled for everybody to drop the rest of their grenades right into the center of the hole. As they grabbed the bandoliers off, I saw them stick their talons into the rings and wait. We dove down hard and made our run straight towards the hole itself. As we could see down, not too far, maybe 100 feet at most, a giant maw was sitting there, and all we could see was it pushing its way up with several teeth in all rounded directions, teeth designed to pierce and crush and take everything down with them. This thing was also far larger than the others, as we could see that it was pushing the sides of this hole out as it was trying to make its way to the surface. And this is why we had to make our move. I was the first one to pull my pins and drop, and pulled away, so I couldn't really see what was going on. But I could hear the cavalcade of concussion and combustion that went into the hole. Whatever in the hell was in there turned out to open its mouth and eat what we were throwing, and swallowed everything as we pulled out of our dive. I truly didn't get to see it, and I'm not sure I wanted to, as a symphony of muffled explosions radiated out of the hole. I knew the only thing I had left to drop were actually a couple of thermal grenades, and those don't actually explode. However, they will burn clean through several feet of steel before they burn out. The screams of pain that bellowed out of the hole after the whole muffled explosions was long, deep wails as the stench of internal organs burning up and exploding due to the heat filled the air. I swear at one point I saw something liquid shoot out of the hole as the death scream continued. All I could think was, and I thought they smell bad on the outside. Immediately covering my snout and flying over the hole, trying not to vomit, I can see clearly that whatever it is, or was, isn't moving anymore. In fact, it appears that it's slowly beginning to slide back down into the hole. I realized it was dead, and we headed back to the fight as the entrails seemed to be falling out of its ass, and as such, it would lose its rigidity on all sides, eventually deflate like a balloon, and slide back down the hole. At least we don't have to bury it. The full humans seem to be facing two of the three remaining grubs, as we see one has turned and is slowly moving away. Since no ordnance is hitting that one, it's going to be our next target. I signal to everybody to prep their bug blades, and we all pull them out and drop down, landing hard and piercing deep with our blades right between the armor pieces. With that, we began to climb down the sides, using gravity to pull us down as we dragged our blades down the side and not stopping until we reached the ground itself. The lacerations on the side numbered about a dozen, 20 to 40 feet long lacerations, and at minimum 2 feet deep. This giant grub began to thrash, sending most of us to the ground covered in grub juice as it squirted out of the lacerations. As I landed and saw this junk sliding off me, I'm like, yeah. The girls won't want to touch me for a week after being covered in sticky goop. Ugh. The smell was a mix of a garbage dump in the summer heat, burnt engine fluids, rotten fish, and bad eggs with just a hint of manure for flavor. As it bled out, we all ran to a building so we could climb up, get some height, as we needed it to get ourselves back into the air quick. The reason being, we realized we had company. Honestly, I don't think I've ever climbed up the side of a building so fast before, because we could see from the opposite side of the post of our village, there came a fairly large group that can be seen as they make their way towards us. The silhouette with the sun in the back is clear, and the signature of the wasps is unmistakable. As the wasps begin to get close, I could see two of them fall down as the one jet they're able to get back up into the fight and operational sends its two remaining heavy missiles right into them. One crashes hard to the ground as ground fire breaks the belly open and the guts just spill out as the huge wasp comes crashing in like some sort of large jet. Over a dozen seem to not even care as they simply fly in, not giving the first bit of a crap about who's shooting them, grab the grubs, alive or dead, and carry them away. The last grub alive actually fights back very hard, killing two wasps by beating the hell out of them or trying to eat the damn things, before these wasps end up driving stingers between the plates of the grub's back, and with that, it stopped moving. Whether it was knocked out or dead, who knows? We stayed back as they simply flew away with their prize, and many on the ground were cheering, and we could hear them very clearly. Those of us in the sky, though, we knew that this was not time to celebrate as we shot each other a look that said, "This battle's not over yet." We had to circle a few times to find a good place to land, and eventually we did find a decent place. After landing in the post for the very first time, I looked around and went, "Wow, this place is a mess." I immediately walked over, waved at a few others who immediately pulled their weapons and started yelling, "Hey, where's the commander?" They were looking at me strange until I asked, "The OIC, where are they?" Eventually, I got a hold of an LT, which unfortunately meant that I had to walk my way up the chain all the way to the Brigadier General who was in charge. I walked in and said, "We gotta talk." He was a little busy and asked me if we could come back in about 2 hours. I said okay, and asked him if there was any place we could get a shower. He kind of looked at us weird, and I knew he didn't want us anywhere near a shower where humans were, so he simply pointed us at a small pond in order to rinse off. I saw that water. I couldn't dive down in that shit fast enough. I want this yuck off of me. Ugh, it's still dripping. Yuck. As we came back up, my youngest actually rose to the surface with a fish in his claws. He hadn't quite pierced it. Somehow he had caught the damn thing without killing it. We unfortunately had to remind him that this was somebody else's food supply. As soon as he realized the implication of what we were talking about, as people will kill for food nowadays, he simply tossed the fish back. When we got back to the general's office, one of his subordinates tried to delay us. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. I simply pushed him out of the way, said, "Move, I'm talking to him now," and walked into his office. Surprisingly, he asked me why I was late. I simply shot the subordinate a look and got to what we were talking about. And the conversation was going to be very brief anyway. I simply said, "Look, we're both busy. I'll make this quick. We can get rid of those wasps, but we require some items." This suddenly got his attention, and now he was fully focused on what I was saying, and along with everybody else. After explaining how we took out a nest last time, the general simply thought about it. He started asking for certain paperwork, and he looked it over. After going through a couple of manifests from the air wing, he said, "I've got a better idea. Instead of a few bottles of homemade napalm, we can hit them with something much better. It should burn them up quite well." I asked, "What do you got, some Lily P around or something?" "Yup. We have enough in the AHA, the ammo holding area, to burn them 10 times over. Once is enough. If there's anything we can do, though." He then almost smiled at us, but I could see he was trying to hold his professionalism. "Sure is. Take this map. Find them. We can do the rest." I took the map and simply told him, "Okay, we'll find them. We'll be back before you know it." As I went to walk out, I paused for a second and turned and said, "Just make sure you hit them at night. If you don't, you won't get them all." And then kept walking. I could see the contemplation in the general's eyes as we left. On the way out, we could hear one of the subordinates yelling, "You're not going to trust that monster, are you?" Even though the others around me shot me a look, I just kept walking down the hall. Honestly, I was more concerned without hitting my head on this watch the exit sign. I told you to duck. Though before we get on with this mission, first things have to be first. We need to contact the village and let them know what's going on, and the comms we have are not going to reach. I could feel a few having some tension with us actually taking flight from the third floor, but whatever. They can sit there and watch and go in awe at what we can do for all I give a crap at this moment. We flew off and realized that they had finished up with that first group of bugs. The only ones left were the spiders. We immediately turned down the road, and we were able to catch up with them on the way back. We stopped them and told them what had happened. They promised to let the others know, and we told them to keep the meals hot for us, which is a standard "we'll be right back" type of phrase for us. We then took to the sky once more as the sun began to set. We spread way far out and began looking for those subtle signs of a nest. Even at night, it should be easy to tell, especially with our eyes. We might not be able to go from dark to light and light to dark very well, but at night, we see better than a set of nods. What made it even easier is when we found the nest, we could see the wasps still outside trying to pull the carcass of the grubs inside. We kind of chuckled as we watched them fight against each other, thinking, typical insects. They try to work together, but they don't even know if they should be pushing or pulling down there. I looked at the map, and it didn't take me long at all to terrain associate, which was pretty easy considering there was a river right underneath us at that point. I realized something and said, boy, they're a lot closer than I thought they would be. After quadruple checking the map and passing it around to make sure everybody agreed, we headed back. And we nearly gave Staff Duty a heart attack when we simply walked in the front door. I, of course, had to duck to make sure I didn't hit anything. And then he looks up and sees us standing there. It was the first time he actually saw us, and, well, it was pretty obvious when he fell back on his chair, and next thing I know, he fires a shot that bounces off my bug armor. Everybody ducks immediately. I'm yelling, "Ceasefire! Ceasefire, you dumbass!" waving my hand, palm forward in the correct hand signal to make sure he stopped. Everybody immediately ran out of the rooms hearing a shot, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I simply told them that we had the intel for the general. They simply looked and went, "That was fast." "Yeah, that's what we do. Now where is he?" Though still wiping sleep out of his eyes, the general was more than happy with the report when we showed up. We had taken copious notes, and within an hour, there we were briefing the pilots and navigators on the mission. And the pilots, well, surprisingly look really old. Although this makes sense because they don't have enough excess fuel to train new pilots. The new, younger pilots have barely any time, 8, maybe 10 hours of flight time, and that's it. This was going to be a very interesting mission, especially at night, and they needed the most experience. I just hope they would be able to hold up. As we were going through the battle plan, I found out that both of them had enough ordnance each to take out the nest. As I informed them about waiting for the queens to emerge, or whatever you might call the queens in this case, they argued that the white phosphorus should be enough. And that's when I asked them, "So, you want the larger wasps to survive and rebuild the colony, or do you want them to come back here and kill everybody? Because that's what's going to happen. Is that what you want?" This got them to realize that we weren't joking about any of this. We had intel they needed. We then informed them that the nest that we had hit before was massive, yet significantly smaller than this one. And that's when they truly listened, as we had told them what size these bugs were and how big they could be. And of course, how nasty. After everything was done, we stepped outside and watched from the ground as the F-16s lifted off. Each of them loaded down pretty heavy and had to hit their afterburners just to get off the deck. Once we saw that, we immediately took to the air and followed, as we wanted to make sure that everything went right. I didn't have comms with them, except for one small little radio. They had my frequency, but still, I knew they weren't going to ask us for help. From the air, we could see the initial strike way off in the distance. At this point, the sun was barely at first light as the entire area began to fill up with that dark red tone of fire. The firestorm that enveloped the area spread like that nest had been covered in kerosene, and within just a couple of minutes, the larger wasps tried to fly off as they broke through the edge of the nest itself. Most were on fire as they took off and ended up crashing in a heap on the ground as the fire itself burned their wings off and then went inside their bodies and killed them. The larger ones burst out with their many eyes looking around for the culprit, the one that set their nest on fire. Even from our vantage point, we could tell that this one might be a little smart. As it turns out, this sucker had actually folded his wings down as tight as he could so they wouldn't actually catch fire and burn off. My heart dropped to my tail when I realized that this giant SOB had just locked on to us flyers. As it began to unfold its wings to take flight, the other plane struck. The missile hit true, spraying phosphorus all across the entire left side, and made this beast scream and wail in pain as it saw the bird go flying by so close that I swear it could tell what color eyes the pilot had. Then it seemed to notice the other plane. In order to hunt at least one of these planes down and escape the inferno that was currently climbing up its ass, the giant wasp tried to take flight again, jumping up with its hind legs and raising its wings. It did, and for a moment, right before the left wings disintegrated, forcing it to fall down into the inferno, the walls of the nest holding her up broke under the pressure of her landing, and the entire nest collapsed, sending her down a few hundred feet to burn with the rest of its kind. After this, we didn't stick around. There was nothing else to see anyway. And it was also a long flight back. I figure at this point, the F-16s could take care of whatever might come out anyway. The whole valley was anyway a firestorm, and it was getting a little hard to breathe. After the long trip back and landing, everyone came out to give us a hero's welcome. That is, until they tried to hug us. The stench from the grubs was still on us like skunk spray, and it just didn't want to come off, and it's more than a little disgusting. That morning, we ended up eating outside in the sun, many of us hoping that the UV radiation would burn some of this crap off of us. We couldn't smell it, but everybody else sure could. We wanted to ask how everybody was doing, but nobody wanted to get close. I couldn't even really say too much about that, as they set the table and then called us over. As I wanted to walk over, I could see that they were downwind, and even my stone-faced dolls covered their mouths in disgust. Ah well, that just means I can't go in the house, and a few days of patrol won't be so bad. And maybe after that, everything can go back to normal. Or at least what counts as normal around here. After a few days, I decided on my patrol I would land in the village center. Though everybody there also wanted to keep their distance, the stench is going away, but it's still pretty strong. I was still able to converse, but I had to raise my voice a little loud. In truth, I was only there to ask them a couple questions. I wanted to know how the full humans were doing, because for some reason we hadn't heard anything from the radio, and also wondered if they will be sending a convoy soon. When I asked these questions, any smiles of me being there seemed to disappear, and they also began to look at each other worrying. They continued to do this as I said, "What? What?" And they simply looked at me and then looked away. I simply yelled out, "Okay, what don't I know?" When they didn't answer, I yelled, "What don't I know?" Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me on Chapter 34 of They Call Us Monsters. Before I go, I need to send some special thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those will be MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Guardian Sage, SS Demon, Brian Kemp, Sir, Chris Dixon, and Cause Lynn. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, ejecting.